Hello, English learners around the world. Welcome to Story-Driven English, where we transform language learning from a tedious task into an exciting journey. Today, we're diving into a story that affects billions of lives yet remains misunderstood. By many, the Dragon's Balancing Act. Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover your life savings have lost half their value. Your job security has vanished overnight, and the products you rely on daily have doubled in price. For millions of Chinese citizens, this isn't imagination. It's a growing reality as their nation navigates the treacherous waters of economic transformation and trade wars. But here's what most news outlets won't tell you. Behind the headlines about GDP numbers and tariff percentages lie real human stories, families struggling to maintain their standard of living, businesses fighting for survival, and government officials walking political tightropes with the world watching their every move. In the next 15 minutes, you'll gain more insight into China's economic challenges than most people acquire from months of reading news headlines. You'll expand your English vocabulary with authentic, contextual learning that sticks in your memory. And most importantly, you'll understand how global economic battles between superpowers ultimately trickle down to affect ordinary people like you and me. Before we begin this fascinating journey, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Why? Because Story-Driven English brings you weekly content that doesn't just teach you English, it expands your understanding of our complex world while building your language skills naturally and effectively. Our subscribers consistently tell us their English comprehension improves faster with our stories than with any textbook they've tried, ready to enhance your English while uncovering the human side of one of today's biggest global economic dramas. Let's begin. The Dragon's Balancing Act. The Dragon's Balancing Act in the sprawling metropolis of Shanghai. The morning sun cast long shadows across the gleaming skyscrapers. Li Wei sipped his tea at a small corner cafe, watching the bustling streets below. At 45, he had witnessed his country's remarkable transformation from a struggling economy to a global powerhouse. But lately, something felt different. The newspapers spoke of economic challenges and trade tensions. But what did that really mean for ordinary people like him? Wei pulled out his phone and scrolled through the news. Another headline about tariffs and trade wars between China and America caught his eye. He sighed, wondering how these distant political games would affect his family's daily life. As a middle-class factory supervisor, he had always believed in China's economic miracle. Now, doubt crept in like the morning fog over the Huangpu River. "More tea, Mr. Li?" asked the waitress, a young woman named Ming. "Yes, please," Wei nodded, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. "Long night?" Ming smiled tiredly. "I'm working 3 jobs now. My parents back in Anhui province need money for my father's medical bills, and my brother just started university." Wei nodded sympathetically. "Times are tough for many people. The government says the economy is growing at over 5%. Ming said quietly, "But somehow it doesn't feel that way for regular folks like us. My salary barely covers my tiny apartment, and prices keep rising. This was a conversation Wei had heard many times lately. China's economic statistics showed impressive growth, yet ordinary citizens seemed to be struggling more than ever. The gap between rich and poor stretched wider than the mighty Yangtze. My cousin lost his job at the electronics factory, Wei shared. They said American tariffs had reduced orders by 60%. Now he drives for a ride-sharing service, earning half of what he made before, Ming nodded knowingly. My roommate worked for a toy exporter. Same story. The factory moved operations to Vietnam last month. As Wei finished his tea, he thought about his own family. His son, Zhao Jun, had graduated from university with a computer science degree 2 years ago, but was still jumping between temporary jobs. His wife's clothing shop was seeing fewer customers each month. Even Wei worried about his position at the automotive parts factory, which had recently cut 100 jobs due to slowing demand. That evening, Wei sat with his family at their modest apartment dining table. His wife, Mai, served steaming bowls of noodles while their son stared at his phone. How was work today? Mai asked, her eyes showing concern beneath her smile. Wei hesitated. Our manager announced more cost-cutting measures. The trade war is hitting our exports hard. We're reducing production by 20% next month. Will you? Mai couldn't finish the sentence. My position should be safe for now, Wei reassured her, though uncertainty lingered in his voice. How was the shop today? Mai shook her head slightly. 3 customers. Just 3. Last year at this time, I would have had at least 15 daily shoppers. Zhao Jun looked up from his phone. I got another rejection today. The tech companies said they're freezing hiring because of uncertain market conditions. Wei sighed. This is happening everywhere. My colleague Huang said his brother-in-law's construction company has stopped work on 2 major projects because investors pulled out. It's not just the trade war, Zhao Jun added, his university education evident in his analysis. Property prices are falling for the first time in years. Many people have their life savings tied up in real estate. Now they feel poorer, so they spend less. Wei nodded thoughtfully. Li Chen from accounting told me he and his wife had purchased 3 apartments as investments. Now they can't sell them without losing money, and the mortgage payments are crushing them. The government will fix things, Mai said firmly. They always do. Remember the financial crisis in 2008? China recovered faster than anyone. Wei wasn't so sure. This feels different. The competition with America isn't just about trade anymore. It's about technology, influence, and power. Later that night, Wei stood on their small balcony, looking out at the sea of lights stretching to the horizon. Shanghai never slept, its energy a testament to China's ambition. But beneath the glittering surface, uncertainty bubbled like water at a simmer. For ordinary people like Wei and his family, the grand geopolitical chess match between superpowers translated into everyday worries. Job security, rising costs, and diminishing opportunities. Wei thought about his father, who had worked the fields with calloused hands and never owned more than 2 pairs of shoes. By comparison, Wei's family lived in luxury. Yet his father had never worried about losing his livelihood overnight. Progress, Wei reflected, came with its own unique anxieties. As autumn gave way to winter, Wei noticed more for rent signs appearing in shop windows. The bustling commercial street near his home grew quieter. Even the normally crowded restaurants had empty tables on weekend evenings. Something was shifting in China's economic landscape, and ordinary people were the first to feel the tremors. Zhang Min adjusted her designer glasses and stared at the quarterly reports spread across her expansive desk. As CEO of TechFusion Enterprises, a mid-sized technology company specializing in smartphone components, she had navigated numerous business challenges over the past decade. However, the latest figures made her stomach tighten with concern. The American orders are down 65% since the new tariffs, her finance director reported from across the polished conference table. European orders are stable, but they can't compensate for the loss. Min nodded, her expression carefully neutral. Leadership meant projecting confidence, even when uncertainty loomed. And our new Southeast Asian markets, growing but slowly. Vietnam and Thailand together account for only 15% of what we've lost from America. The meeting continued with similar reports from other departments. Production scaling back, research projects delayed, hiring frozen. When her executive team finally filed out of the glass-walled conference room, Min allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Rubbing her temples against the building pressure, her assistant, Liu, entered with a cup of green tea. Your 3 o'clock appointment with the bank representative is here. Min straightened her posture. Send him in. The bank representative, a young man with a serious expression, delivered news Min had been dreading. I'm afraid the bank is tightening lending requirements for technology sector businesses. Given the current economic climate and particularly the uncertainties surrounding export-focused operations like yours, we'll need additional collateral for the loan renewal. This was a problem. TechFusion had been planning to expand its artificial intelligence division, a strategic pivot away from hardware and toward higher-value services less vulnerable to tariffs. That expansion now hung in the balance after the banker left. Min called her old university classmate, Chen Wei, who ran a similar-sized manufacturing company producing medical devices. It's the same everywhere, Chen confirmed. The banks are scared. Foreign investors are pulling back. Everyone's waiting to see how this trade situation develops. Are you still moving forward with your Malaysian factory? Min asked, proceeding but cautiously. We have to diversify away from China-based production. These American tariffs aren't going away soon, and our European clients are nervous about supply chain stability. Min gazed out her office window at Shanghai's financial district, where dozens of corporate headquarters reached skyward. Remember when our biggest challenge was managing growth? Now we're fighting for survival, not just survival, Chen corrected. Transformation. The old model of being the world's factory isn't sustainable anymore. China needs to move up the value chain. Easier said than done when investment capital is drying up, Min countered that evening. Min attended a private dinner with several other business leaders in a secluded room at an exclusive restaurant. The conversation inevitably turned to the economy and the government's response to mounting pressures. They're trapped between competing priorities, said Huang, who ran a large construction company. They want to maintain growth targets, but they also need to address structural problems like excessive debt and low consumer spending, and now they have to manage this technology competition with America, added Lin, a veteran of the semiconductor industry. That requires massive investment when resources are already stretched. Min sipped her wine thoughtfully. My company received a visit from government officials last week. They're encouraging us to focus on developing domestic technology alternatives to American products. Same here, nodded Lin. They're offering tax incentives and subsidized land if we expand our research into advanced chip design. But can China really achieve technological self-sufficiency? Another executive questioned. The global supply chain is deeply interconnected. The conversation continued late into the night, reflecting the complex calculations facing Chinese businesses. Companies like Min stood at a crossroads: retreat and conserve resources, or boldly invest in new directions with no guarantee of success. The following week, Min called an all-hands meeting with her employees. Hundreds gathered in the company auditorium, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Tech Fusion stands at a pivotal moment, Min began. The global business environment is changing rapidly, and we must adapt. Some of these changes will be difficult. She outlined the company's new strategy, scaling back certain hardware production lines while investing more in software development and artificial intelligence. There would be layoffs in some departments, but new opportunities in others. Our goal is not merely to weather this storm, Min continued, but to emerge stronger on the other side. China's economic journey has never been smooth or predictable. Those who survive are those who anticipate change and embrace it. As she spoke, Min thought about her own father, who had started a tiny electronics repair shop in the early days of China's economic reforms. He had navigated numerous policy shifts and market upheavals, always finding a way forward. Now that resilience was being tested on a national scale, later that week, Min attended a government-organized conference on technological innovation. The meeting hall buzzed with government officials, business leaders, and academic experts discussing how China could accelerate its development of cutting-edge technologies. The pressure from America has created an unexpected opportunity, the keynote speaker declared. It has forced us to confront our technological dependencies and address them urgently. Min noticed a shift in the government's messaging. The emphasis was no longer on rapid GDP growth at any cost, but on quality development and self-reliance in key technologies. For businesses like hers, this meant both challenge and opportunity. Those who could align with national priorities might find support. Others would struggle alone. As she networked during the conference breaks, Min heard countless stories similar to her own. Companies across sectors were reinventing themselves, seeking new markets, and developing alternative business models. The trade war had accelerated trends that were already underway, forcing painful but perhaps necessary adjustments. We're diversifying our supply chains, one manufacturing executive told her, setting up factories in Vietnam, Malaysia, even Mexico. The days of having all production in China are over. We're focusing entirely on the domestic market now, another business owner shared. China has 1.4 billion consumers. If we can't sell globally, we'll sell locally. Min returned to her office with a clearer sense of direction. The path forward would be difficult, requiring tough decisions and strategic pivots. But Touch Fusion would survive and perhaps emerge stronger. The company would need to become leaner, more innovative, and more attuned to shifting government priorities. As winter deepened, Min found herself working longer hours, reviewing research, proposals, meeting with potential domestic partners, and reassuring nervous investors. The business landscape was changing dramatically, but change had always been the one constant in China's economic story. Those who could adapt would write. The next chapter, Vice Premier Wang Jian stared out the window of his government office in Beijing. The view of Tiananmen Square and the ancient Forbidden City beyond provided a fitting backdrop for his contemplation of China's past, present, and future. As one of the country's top economic officials, Wang carried the weight of steering the world's second-largest economy through increasingly turbulent waters. His assistant entered with a stack of reports. The latest economic indicators, sir, and the briefing materials for tomorrow's State Council meeting on the American tariff situation. Wang nodded. Thank you, Liu. Any updates from our Washington embassy? Nothing official, but our sources suggest the American administration is considering raising tariffs further on electronic components and rare earth products. This wasn't unexpected, but it was concerning nonetheless. Wang had spent decades in economic management, rising through provincial posts to the central government. He had witnessed China's miraculous growth firsthand. Now, that growth model faced its greatest test. Later that morning, Wang met with his economic advisory team, a mix of party officials, academic economists, and former business leaders. The first quarter GDP growth came in at 5.4%, better than projected, began Professor Zhang, a prominent economist. However, the underlying indicators show significant stress. Consumption growth is slowing. Property investment continues to decline, and export orders are down in key sectors. What about the stimulus measures implemented last quarter? Wang asked. They've had some effect, responded Director Li from the central bank. Infrastructure spending is up, and we've seen increased lending to small businesses. But private consumption remains weak, and many banks are still hesitant to extend credit given rising default concerns. The discussion continued, covering unemployment figures officially stable, but with concerning trends in youth unemployment, foreign investment declining in manufacturing but stable in services, and various sector-specific challenges. The fundamental question, Wang said finally, is whether our current approach is sustainable. Are we merely treating symptoms while deeper structural adjustments are needed? This was the heart of the matter. For decades, China had relied on a growth model driven by massive investment, export manufacturing, and state-directed development. That model had lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty and transformed China into an economic powerhouse. But it had also created imbalances, excessive debt, environmental degradation, and an economy that remained heavily dependent on exports and investment rather than domestic consumption. We must accelerate the transition to a consumption-driven economy, Wang stated. This trade conflict with America isn't just about tariffs. It's about forcing us to confront structural issues we've delayed addressing for too long. The afternoon brought a different meeting, this one focusing specifically on technology policy. Wang listened as various ministers outlined China's progress in artificial intelligence, semiconductor manufacturing, quantum computing, and other strategic technologies. The American restrictions have slowed our progress in chip development, acknowledged the Minister of Science and Technology. But they've also created unprecedented domestic focus on achieving self-sufficiency. How realistic is that goal? Wang asked directly. A thoughtful silence fell across the room before the minister answered. Complete self-sufficiency? Probably. Impossible in the short term. The global technology ecosystem is too interdependent. But reducing critical vulnerabilities, that's achievable within 5 years with sufficient investment and policy support. Wang nodded. This balanced assessment matched his own thinking. China couldn't decouple entirely from global technology networks, nor should it try. But it needed to develop alternatives in critical areas where foreign restrictions threatened national development. That evening, Wang attended a small private dinner with President Chen and other senior leaders. These informal gatherings allowed for more candid discussion than formal government meetings. The American tariffs are a short-term challenge, President Chen observed. But they've highlighted long-term imperatives. Our economy needs rebalancing regardless of external pressures, Wang agreed. The question is how to manage this transition without creating social instability. Millions of workers depend on export industries. Thousands of companies need time to adapt. If we move too quickly, we risk unemployment and business failures. Too slowly, and we remain vulnerable to external pressure, and the people's expectations continue to rise, added another official. They've grown accustomed to improving living standards. Economic slowdown threatens the social contract. This was the government's central dilemma. China's leadership had maintained legitimacy, largely through economic growth and improving living conditions. As growth necessarily slowed and the economy restructured, How would that social contract evolve? The next morning, Wang traveled to Shanghai for meetings with local officials and business leaders. The city embodied both China's remarkable achievements and its current challenges. Gleaming financial towers stood alongside traditional neighborhoods. Luxury boutiques attracted wealthy shoppers while migrant workers struggled with rising costs. At a tea roundtable with business representatives, Wang heard firsthand accounts of companies adapting to the new economic reality. We've shifted 60% of our export production to our Vietnamese facilities, explained one factory owner. The remaining 40% focuses on domestic sales and non-American markets. We're investing heavily in research, shared a technology entrepreneur. The government incentives for innovation have helped offset the loss of foreign customers. Wang listened carefully, asking questions about their specific challenges and needs. These frontline perspectives would inform national policy adjustments. The final day of Wang's Shanghai visit included a tour of a technology park where startups focused on everything from artificial intelligence to biotechnology. The energy and creativity were palpable, a reminder that China's economic future depended on innovation rather than imitation. 5 years ago, 80% of the companies here were trying to create Chinese versions of American products, the park director explained. Now, most are developing original technologies aimed at China-specific problems. Wang found this encouraging. And their funding sources? Increasingly domestic, the director replied. Private venture capital, state-backed funds, and corporate investment. Foreign investment has become less important, partly by necessity, but also because domestic capital has matured. That evening, before returning to Beijing, Wang reflected on what he had seen and heard. China stood at a critical juncture. The economic miracle that had defined the past for decades was giving way to a new chapter with different challenges and opportunities. The trade conflict with America had accelerated this transition, creating pain, but also clarity of purpose. Back in his Beijing office the following week, Wang reviewed the draft of a major economic policy document before it went to the State Council. The language emphasized dual circulation, strengthening domestic demand while maintaining openness to the world. It outlined support for key technologies, measures to boost household income and consumption, and gradual financial reforms. Will it be enough? Wang wondered aloud. His assistant, who had worked with him for many years, offered a thoughtful response. Perhaps the question isn't whether any single policy will be sufficient, but whether we have the right direction and the flexibility to adjust as conditions change. Wang smiled slightly at this wisdom. China's economic journey had never followed a straight line. Its strength had always been pragmatism, the willingness to experiment, learn, and adapt. The current challenges were formidable, but they were part of a longer historical process of development and transformation. As winter gave way to spring, new economic data showed tentative signs of stabilization. Domestic consumption was gradually improving, and some export sectors were finding alternative markets. The property market remained weak, but the worst fears of financial contagion had not materialized. Most importantly, the technological self-reliance initiative was gaining momentum, with breakthrough announcements in semiconductor manufacturing and artificial intelligence. The path forward would not be easy. Balancing competing priorities, managing public expectations, and navigating international tensions would require skillful policy coordination. But Wang felt cautiously optimistic. China had faced greater challenges in its long history and had emerged stronger through adaptation and resilience. In their final analysis, the trade conflict had not forced China to sacrifice its economic future. Rather, it had accelerated necessary transitions that were already underway. The pain was real for many businesses and workers, but the direction was ultimately aligned with China's long-term interests. The Dragon was adjusting its flight path, but its journey continued. Li Wei's factory remained open, though with reduced shifts. His son Zhao Jun eventually found a position with a domestic technology company developing alternatives to American software. Ming, the waitress, enrolled in a government-subsidized training program for healthcare workers. Zhang Min's company TechFusion survived by pivoting toward AI applications for the domestic market. And Vice Premier Wang continued balancing competing priorities, seeking a path that would maintain stability while enabling necessary changes throughout Shanghai, Beijing, and countless cities across China. Ordinary people adjusted to the new economic reality. They found ways to adapt, just as Chinese society had done repeatedly throughout its long history. The national narrative emphasized resilience and self-reliance, while government policies sought to cushion the impact of transition for those most vulnerable. China's economic relationship with America had fundamentally changed, perhaps irreversibly. But in that change lay the seeds of a more sustainable and balanced development model, one less dependent on exports and foreign technology, more driven by domestic innovation and consumption. The Dragon was finding its new balance. Key vocabulary repeated throughout economic growth: the increase in the amount of goods and services produced in a country over time. Trade war, a situation where countries restrict each other's trade through tariffs and other barriers. Tariffs, taxes imposed on imported goods. Domestic consumption spending by people within a country on goods and service. Exports, sending goods to be sold in another country. Manufacturing, the process of making goods in factories. Invest, putting money into something to make a profit. Innovation, creating new ideas, methods, or products. Technology, the application of scientific knowledge for practical purpose. Self-reliance, depending on one's own capabilities rather than external support. Transition, the process of changing from one state or condition to another. Adapt, to change in order to deal with new circumstances. Difficult, relating to the basic organization or makeup of something. Policy, a course of action adopted by a government or organization. Strategy, a plan designed to achieve a particular goal. Balance, a situation in which different elements are in the correct proportion. Scaling, a difficult task that tests one's abilities. Proportionality, A favorable time or set of circumstances for doing something results the ability to recover quickly from difficulties. Perceive a particular way of viewing something. Thank you for watching the Dragon's Balancing Act on Story-Driven English. We hope this story has helped you improve your English skills while gaining insights into the complex economic relationship between China and the United States. If you enjoyed this story and found it valuable for your English learning journey, please give our video a thumbs up. Your likes help our content reach more English learners worldwide. Do you have thoughts about the story? Perhaps you've experienced similar economic changes in your own country? Share your perspective in the comments below. It's a great way to practice your English writing skills while connecting with our community of learners. Don't forget to share this video with friends or classmates who are also learning English. Stories like these provide rich vocabulary and real-world context that textbooks often can't offer. And if you're new here, we'd love to have you join our growing family of English learners. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss our weekly stories and news-based English lessons. At Story-Driven English, we believe that meaningful content makes language learning both effective and enjoyable. Remember, the best way to improve your English is consistent practice with engaging material. We'll be back next week with another compelling story to help you on your language journey. Until then, keep reading, keep listening, and keep practicing your English every day. See you in our next video.